Welcome back to Reading Between the Lines with Tandaman. This is episode 14, and I have someone all the way from Yangzhou, China. Her name is Yanie. Her Chinese name is Yanson, and it's an honor to have you with us, Yang. Thank you very
Oh,
much.
wow. Okay, thank you so much, Tam, for allowing me or inviting me on this channel. I'm very excited to be here. So thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. She has a background that will take away everyone's breath, and I can't wait to let her speak her background. Why don't you give us a brief introduction about yourself, Yanni?
Okay, so basically I'm originally from Yangzhou, China. But I was adopted from, Canadian parents in Montreal. So I've always lived in Montreal. However, probably I think that I probably wanted something more. So I decided to also go into the fashion industry, going from New York, Milan, Paris, and then back to Montreal and then Shanghai. I think how I got there is probably I think triggered with my childhood. I think probably the teenage years, probably like 14, 15 were a very big catalyst approach because I was doing gymnastics a lot back then. And I remember I was kind of like getting bullied or like marginalized or whatever you want to say. And I think in a way that kind of triggered, I mean, you can take that energy and you can go backwards or you can go forwards. And I think what I did instead is I actually used it and became more exaggerated with it. I was like wearing mohawks and I was like changing 2 to 3 times a day to be even more provoking and so forth. So really probably going against the wave. Probably it's also those teenage years. And then after that, I think that I had the opportunity to go to the University of Ottawa. I went directly at the age of 17. So we didn't do the college or the CEGEP or things like that. I got the scholarship directly there and studied business and commerce. It was super boring, but of course it taught me a lot. And then I got the opportunity to go and do a co-op program with the university, again, through a different sponsorship to go to New York and then also to go to Italy. I didn't talk about France earlier, but all of these different locations that I was able to go really propelled me culturally to understand different environments and understand the different types of people. And I think that here, what happened is that I decided to go a bit further, and I knew my purpose was going to be in fashion. Probably I didn't know in what aspect, but I know that probably even though I was only 17 or 18 or whatever, to be able to go in this business, financial independence is extremely important. So with the little amount of cash that I had from the scholarships or the bursaries or whatever we want to call it, I actually took that cash with, of course, the help of my parents in order to buy a building in Canada to really allow for that building to pay for my current expenses at the university, right? The interest rates or I don't know if what we can call it, but also to pay for the future experiences that I'd like to have, and so forth. So that building was basically paying for the trips, for the blog, and so forth. Because later on, I decided to open a blog when I went to France to do my MBA, and that kind of, I don't know if I may permit myself to say, kind of more lavish lifestyle. That building helped me or permit me to be able to live that in order to get the blog up and running. So it was kind of like self invested. So this is a bit how I created the path towards the MBA and so forth in France. And then I decided to go to China. Maybe it was probably another calling. So really listening to my instincts. And when I went to China, I believed back then that I did the right choice because that time was the El Dorado. That was when basically the amount of investment and the amount of budgets that luxury fast fashion or premium fashion brands have was huge. I mean, huge, huge, huge. So that was really what propelled the blog to a totally different level. We started having a mini team here, the copywriting team. We started even going back to Milan and Paris 3, 4 times per year to do, of course, the BD, but also going to assist the shows, interviewing the people in Italian or French, and coming back with all of this information to different portals or media, fashion media that were here, like Style TV back in the days, Modern Lady, which is now In Style, and so forth. So this is kind of how I inserted myself in maybe the fashion industry. And then yes, I think then I started to open my own agency. I was working a bit before with local agencies to understand more about the culture, and to also understand about China as a whole. How do we think? What are their goals, and how do they communicate? And from there on, I decided, okay, this is time. I can do this myself and fly away with myself. Yes.
Absolutely. Let me ask you this then, Yanie. As we look at your background, you've had a childhood that is nothing short of something out of a movie, right? You're the first person to ever be adopted from China, right?
For Quebec,
How
yeah.
uh,
For
how
Quebec.
how how did that shape your life experiences?
I think that was very tough, I have to say, because my brothers are Brazilian. So my parents went to get me first, and then they got my brothers in Sao Paulo. And because we're millennials, that means we're the first generation to arrive in Quebec. I think it was extremely tough. I mean, you have to be super tough skinned, because people were super, super unhappy to see a Chinese girl or a Chinese looking girl in their village. Even though I speak French or whatever, English, there was this huge kind of racist wave that was happening. And if you're not ready for that, you could even get punched in the face, right? So those are the things that either bring you down or build you up. So for me, probably I got very tough skin out of this, understanding the differences between people, and also accepting why they're also like this, right? They're like this for a reason. So to be a bit more empathetic at a younger age was also probably important, because they didn't know better. And it's not the other people's fault. And that's the same thing in China. You know, you see the political situation here, and it's not always stable, but there are things about empathy and being human that you say sometimes it's just not their fault. And I think that that's something that my brothers and I were forced to learn at a very, very young age. I mean, one of my brothers is, they're identical twins, but one since last year changed into a girl completely. So this thing really propelled people to look at us and to look at them and to look at me in a different way. I think today, I mean, with the Gen Z situation, it's so different. I think I wish I was born in the Gen Z era, I have to tell you, but because it's much more inclusive, it's much more open, and it's much more transparent than before. I do think. I think it's a totally different generation, and much more positive in a certain way.
Absolutely. Um, and as we talk about yourself, we can't not talk about your company, right? Pom Pom and Sanpom, both of them.
Yeah.
Why don't you give us a little bit brief introduction about Pom Pom and Sanpom? What are they, and what are you trying to achieve with them?
Yes, so for Pom Pom, the mission is really to elevate that world of conscious fashion through pioneered first-class services in creative communications, production, partnerships, and technological initiatives. So really pushing the boundaries forward. So we really focus more on branding, strategy, PR, B2B and B2C channels, social content creation. We have also the studios here, around 4 studios. We just got another studio also yesterday. And that's really more about content creation. And I think in 2020, we were really inspired to create Sanpom with also a different team, which is more of a digital collective fashion studio focusing on motion design, CGI, virtual fashion, 3D modeling, and eventually AR for fashion models. So this is probably what I think inspired us to do this, is because we actually saw the fashion industry firsthand, maybe as a blogger, also maybe from Pom Pom, dealing with samples, dealing with the brands and so forth, and the manufacturers and suppliers, and we realized the waste is huge. Like it's actually really, really huge. I was in a warehouse just, in the center of Shanghai in Renmin Guangchang, and I was in the warehouse. The company is huge. I think you already know it, so I won't say the name. And they're like, "Oh, Yannie, take whatever or whatever because we're gonna burn everything tomorrow." I was like, "What do you mean you're gonna burn everything?" They're like, "Yeah, like every season we burn the items." And I was like, "Oh wow, that's like a 460 square meter space. It's filled with clothes, like it was packed with clothes." And I was like, "Wow, every quarter." And that's only Renmin Guangchang. That's only People's Square. Like they have the warehouses everywhere in the city center of Shanghai. So that really affected me. And I said, okay, we probably have a duty or a responsibility doing PR communications and so forth in China. Why don't we try to get into something we also really love, which was digital fashion, probably a bit more avatar focus and fitting at the initial stage, which led to digital fashion.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. Let me ask you this question. So, what is your goal with Pom Pom and Sampo? What are you trying to achieve with them?
I think that I believe that for Pom Pom, it's really about focusing on, what I said before, really to create more conscious fashion through pioneered first class services in creative communications, production, and tech initiatives. Pom Pom should be a place that is more 300 or three, I cannot say 360, but 180-degree view on the support for PR, social, along with communications and content creation for mostly fashion and lifestyle brands. And I would still like to keep us in this category, along with doing more sustainable cases from a B2B to C perspective. And that is great because it helps us push the boundaries forward. That's why Pom Pom is what made us create digital clothing. So it's always trying to test things out, trying to push the boundaries, and never ever accepting the status quo or things that are like they are. For what concerns Sampom is a bit different. It's a very, very new baby. So this has been initiated right after the COVID. And I think for us, it's to be able to create creative pieces no matter, and be able to allow the users to self-express themselves no matter their race, their culture, their background, or how much money they have. So it's a lot about accessibility. It's a lot about giving high quality first class services to these users, and also be able to help them find the right fitting in the future. That's the very, very long-term future. I do hope that with fitting, with proper fitting mixed with good AR and digital items or physical items, you can actually reduce significantly the amount of CO2 emissions that we create and the amount of actual physical waste that we create in the real world.
Absolutely. You said that your goal is to sort of transition to a phygital workspace, right? Where fashion items can have both a real world fashion item as well as a digital twin, right?
Yes, yes.
So
Absolutely.
let me ask you this question. Do you intend to have your own fashion label, or do you intend to do this for other brands?
Yeah, so we actually already started doing this for other brands. And we actually just created our latest collection. I can show it later if you'd like. So it's actually basically a digital item, and we actually created the physical item from the digital item. So that's basically re-engineering the process of how we create fashion today. Fashion, how does it work today? Well, first you have the sketch, then you have the minimum quantity order, and then you try to sell it. And if you can't sell it, well, the thing just goes to waste, or it's very hard to recycle some items as well because of the threads. So it probably will just go to waste. And what we'd like to do instead is create the digital sample, put the digital, because it's so well done in terms of quality, you put it on your e-commerce. you see if the click rate is high enough, if people are buying it, and if people are not buying it at a certain specific threshold, you say, okay, we cancel this order and we try again. So really going through A/B testing to reduce the amount of samples that you need. And we started also doing this with magazines. Magazines have been asking us to just create the digital clothing only. So I do see kind of this change. It is still a bit slow, but there is definitely a momentum in China anyways, definitely in China. People are already kind of like digitally native. So having the digital item is just an extension for them of their digital lives. The only thing that I do see is because NFTs or cryptocurrency is illegal in China, the way we will use NFTs today in China is more through a cryptoless path. It's going to be more through ownership rights, status rights, IP rights. So it's a bit different.
Absolutely. Why fashion though? Why did you sort of go into fashion? What motivated you to go into fashion?
I don't know. I think like at 14, I still remember I was always trying to buy the latest things and I was obsessed with brands and I love the storytelling. And I remember my parents told me like at 3 years old, I was already looking at dresses and taking the dresses apparently that I wanted from the store. And like I was like showing or whatever. So I think it was probably something that I always knew. I don't know how to explain it, but I do know that I would not be able to be in another industry. I tried to work in the wine industry. I studied wine at Trans Management School in France. Well, more champagne, and I was like, no, that's not my thing. Like, just trying in case, right? And I was like, no, for sure, I'm gonna stick to fashion. But I do understand sticking to this industry. Maybe it's always nice to have things in the back to be able to keep on going, right? To be able to live also a healthy life, also in your mind.
Absolutely. So let me pick on a little bit of your past. Do you think the fact that you were made to feel different than others, you sort of owned that fact that you are different, and then that transpired into your passion for fashion? Is that what sort of created
Yeah,
you in a way?
yeah, I think maybe that did help. My parents are also entrepreneurs, right? They have always most of the time worked for themselves. My uncle also always worked for himself, and my aunts as well, also like kind of power women's of their time. So I think having that culture embedded in our family is something very natural. Now I see my cousin, I think he's only like 10 years old, but already I can already see the patterns. He's gonna be doing his own business as well. So I think it's more about the mindset and how comfortable you are with not having a security net. And I think that that's the probably that I've never really lived with the security net until of course, if you're 17, you're still living with your parents, that's a security net. But if you don't always live with this and you have to try to find your own net, then yeah, then it, maybe working for myself is probably the most natural thing, I think.
Absolutely. Um, where do you see Pom Pom and San Pom 10 years down the line?
I would for Pom Pom or Sampom, I would love to be leading the digital fashion system. I think if we can recreate the digital fashion system for the good, that I think through maybe AR or fitting. So because this is extremely hard to do, so the rigging and the AI behind really great fitting is still not there yet. So really leading the fashion system forward, and changing the linear system to something much more, I guess, in a way, decentralized and much more focused or result oriented, for the benefits of the planet. If I can do this, I think I would be very, very, very happy. Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, Yanni. You also work with the Metaverse Fashion Council. What's that all about? Can you just let us know?
Yes, I was invited to the Metaverse Fashion Council probably several months ago. I think what they are interested in is actually also the location that we are in. Like Shanghai is probably very, very rare for them to have. So also the designer community, the Chinese designer community is also in parallel something very rare. So this is really what we'd like to offer to the council and also offer insights about what's going on here. And yesterday we did the mini pop-up at the Metaverse Fashion Summit in order to really express and make people understand what the Chinaverse is compared to what your metaverse is in the West. So this is the things that, or the beginning of the initiatives that we're doing with Metaverse Fashion Council. Really, really kind team. Very, very nice people. Yeah.
Absolutely. Also, so let me draw comparisons from your personal background and experiences, right? You've lived in Canada, now you live in China, you've lived in Italy, you've lived in France. So if I was to sum it up and draw on your experiences from Canada, from Europe, and from China, what differences do you see within the metaverse and NFT and fashion, digital fashion, and Web3 ecosystem between all three cultures? And what are some pros and cons of such cultures, if you have seen any?
Okay. I don't know if we should be recording this, but I will say it anyways. Okay, I think I'm gonna speak probably a bit more about China rather than Canada. The reason for this is because Canada, I'm not an expert in the Canadian environment, and I don't believe that I have the enough the enough working experience to talk about this. But I can definitely share Europe, like Italy. And also, well, the US is extremely advanced. I mean, a huge part of the members of even the Metaverse Fashion Council is also American. Like the US is extremely advanced in the metaverse. However, China is also extremely, extremely advanced in the metaverse. I mean, just to think about it, in 2021, the government created its own association in China, and they actually announced a 5-year plan for AI, blockchain, cloud computing as a core focus in the next year. Okay, so just to give you an idea, in 2021, 500 companies opening in China, 90% of those companies had the name Metaverse in them. So that definitely gives you a strong alert of what's going to happen in 2022 going forward. And it was extremely hot, this topic. So actually the government did install NFT regulations, and it is now illegal to have or handle crypto in China. They're actually really more focusing on the Chinese yuan instead, and really creating more of a cryptoless path in order to play with the metaverse. So the way we play and the way we're allowed to say things and the way we act in the metaverse is totally different than how you guys are behaving or creating actions there. The third thing is that officially now there are 5 hubs or provinces that include the metaverse in their economic planning. That's Shanghai, Zhejiang, Anhui, Hubei, and Sichuan. And very recently, the Shanghai government allocated around 1.5 billion to the Metaverse Development Fund to accelerate the economic growth. So that is very huge. Those are the positive areas of growing the metaverse in China. There are a huge expansion for this, especially when you talk about the automotive, medical, and urban planning segment. These are definitely the top biggest ones. You even see this at the CIIE, the China International Import Expo, that was around 2 weeks ago. For what concerns about exploration and acquisition, so probably more from a micro standpoint with these large companies, we're seeing Alibaba fighting to purchase VR, shopping, going into virtual idols. Tencent is probably ahead of the game because they have so much cash flow at hand that they are buying cloud, great gaming tech, and so forth. Maybe laggers or like Redbook, who have a huge community in their social commerce platform, but they're also trying to make their blockchain. We don't know if it's working. They tried our space to create this community, and it's still a bit gray, right? And ByteDance, or aka Douyin, they're also acquiring like VR VR headsets or VR companies, and they've created recently Fiagi for a digital fashion VR kind of application. So we all see this running and working together. We just don't know where it's going to take us, but we definitely do think that it's going to be something, not just a wave, but something that's going to change the way we live and communicate with people personally and also on a business.
Absolutely. So, Yanni, let me ask you this question. Do you think in media we get the Chinese ecosystem wrong when it comes to NFT, Metaverse, and Web3?
Yes, I do, because I don't think that I think because also the legislations are very new. I think most of the people really actually don't know about the cryptoless path here, the new regulations here, and how the government is, that's a monopoly. So whatever they say, that is going to be how it is. There is no negotiations or diplomacy, right? So I do think that probably the media outside of China is a bit hard on this country. I mean, for different reasons. But if we really focus more on the Chinaverse, the journey to the East, I do believe that the tech companies here are very, very serious about investing AI, investing in the metaverse, and investing in their own NFTs that probably are not going to signify the same from your side. So from our big topic today is really, how do we connect all of our different metaverses together in a very seamless manner, so people, brands, well, not brands, excuse me, but researchers or tech people are actually already investing on this in order to create that type of Chinaverse marketplace here. So
Absolutely.
we're seeing also Microsoft, one of the biggest companies probably in the world for technology, is actually investing more people actually also in China than the rest of the world. That is something meaningful, because that means that they want to increase the notion of power and the notion of tech in China. So this is also giving a signal to where we're going in the future, and really going forward with much more aggressive knowledge or notion for machine learning, computer vision, and natural language processing. I do think we're going definitely in this direction. There's also another thing to understand. I think you guys came, with Web 1.0, right, Han? Like, you
Yeah.
guys came with desktop, then there was HTML, then there were emails. And I think here we didn't get that. We just became teenagers right away. We just entered Web 2.0, and then we entered Web 3.0. So it's different. Actually, it's even the mindset is different. Like, when I tell my team, okay, especially the younger kids, oh, okay, now we're going to use the desktop to do the research, they just do it on their phones. Okay, even the
Right.
way they think is a bit different. And the other day I spoke to a 6-year-old. Yes, I speak to 6, 7-year-olds, and they were telling me what they wanted for Christmas, and they were like, I want the Gucci belt. And I'm like, oh, that's wonderful. They're like, yeah, but it has to be the digital Gucci belt. And I'm like, I was like, what the digital, why do you want the digital Gucci belt? She's like, oh, I have to show it to my friends in my environment, the digital environment. I said, yeah, but it's as expensive as the real one. Just get the real. Oh no, then I have to show my mom's friends. Okay. So that means that, of course, 5, 6, 8-year-olds don't have the notion of actual money, but I don't think that's what matters. I think what matters is that they're not able to completely differentiate the value between a real item and the digital item. And that means that probably the Gen Z generation is going to go into this, but the real native people that are going to go into this naturally, like walking or drinking water, is going to be the kids of the Gen Zs, probably. That's how I see it in China. And it's going to be serious because it's going to be a totally new economy with totally new experiences. And the brands who are not able to enter, or that are too big or too large, like elephants, they're not going to be walking or running fast enough to catch up with these guys here.
Absolutely. So let me ask you a question. When it comes to Metaverse and Web3, in the West, we have seen sort of a land rush where everyone's rushing to buy Metaverse land. Is it the same in China? Because you said that people can't own cryptocurrencies, but can you own Metaverse land in China?
This, I'm not too specific about this. I think there are specific areas, but what is even the platform for this? There is actually no official platform for us to really be able to officially buy this. So there's still a huge room to enter. A lot of big brands, well, I call them brands, but I should call them big tech companies, are trying to do this. But just to give you an example, is it Tencent or yeah, I think Tencent had their blockchain a month ago, and it was kind of, I do believe it was selling well, and all of a sudden, one day from the other, it stopped. They had to take it down. So people are not really sure about, and everyone just lost their money, by the way. So just lost their money. So I think with this, we're still a bit new. And I think in that area of buying or financial assets, we're definitely lagging behind. I don't think we're here as an investment. We're here as a game, and we're here more as immersive experience. That's why the digital twin is extremely important. Because to buy financial assets, yes, so it is a bit right now for me like buying Legos or buying a very expensive game. So if you are to buy something, it's for self-indulgence. Then you might as well buy the digital Gucci belt, because there is no financial asset incurred behind the sales.
Absolutely. So let me ask you this question. As you see the whole issue where obviously everyone wants to have the best economy, everyone wants to have the best country, right? US for the longest time has had the number one economy, and China is trying to get that number one economy spot. And obviously there are differences. Do you see that affecting your sales for Pom in terms of probably selling your digital goods or even phygital goods outside of China?
We're actually currently selling only in China. I hope that we can sell abroad in the future. However, for now, we saw that the opportunities here are very well in China. We actually did try to sell in Europe, to Spain and Italy. But Italy and Spain, I do see that they're a bit averse to change. So even doing a PR campaign, which is very, very easy, they were extremely against that. There was a lot of friction we saw. So I do see that Italy or Spain might be a bit more, I think maybe it's contradictory, or maybe subject to change, or something that has it, that it really causes them a lot of tension. So we did focus a bit more on the China market, much more, and we do see that it is evolving very fast. However, international fashion brands and luxury brands are definitely still skeptical about this, probably. And I think the reason is because there's so much people talking about the metaverse that it's even created a bad name for itself, right? If you have 5 fishermen that tell you, oh, I'm going to give you a fish, and then you end up with, like, I don't know, some like a frog, probably the 5th fisherman is going to, get penalized for these things. And I think the metaverse, because it's so new, there are all of these funny things happening. And at the end, it's the quality that is really fundamental. The quality should be able to talk for itself and walk that talk. So this is why I think for brands, they do need a lot of education. and you need to make them feel like they're always going to win the game. So quality for sure has to be there, but how do you extend that NFT piece or that digital clothing or that digital twin to the next level? And I think that's where they should be educated, and where we should do our responsibility for that communication or the campaign, or help them get inside the marketplace or mint it effectively for China.
Absolutely. Let's move on to the rapid fire questions, and this is my favorite segment. So if I was to ask you your opinion, and I presume your experience will shape your opinion, what will trigger the mass adoption of Metaverse in Web3?
For China, I do believe it's going to come through offline first. Yeah, so we're gonna have, because I've already heard this several times today, also with Hangzhou government, speaking with them. I think that they're going to invest in physical platforms first with the community, having the physical item in that platform as a experience-driven kind of setting. And I think people are going to get inside of it like this first. I think that's going to be the first step, or the first threshold, if we talk about China.
Absolutely.
And then after that, it's going to gradually increase exponentially. But I think this is going to be the first thing.
Absolutely. Let me ask you this. As you are a fashion brand, I presume you would use true to fit technology. Are you using true to fit technology?
Okay, so I think true to fit technology, we've actually played with this technology for the avatar. I think there is some potential. However, there is a huge, huge challenge to this technology. First, I'm gonna take these pens here to show you. First, this is your avatar. So you actually need to rig it to your digital clothing, right? So sorry, this is the digital clothing, this is your avatar. This is nice in a very virtual world. However, I think we do believe that in the future, we would like to rig it to you, Tan, to your actual body, like what you actually look like, your face, your natural movements. That combination here is much more complex, much more complex. So whoever can do this, it will be definitely ahead of the game. This is something that for us, we call like automated rigging, or rigging based on AI and computer vision. And I do believe that's going to be very, very important. But yet these avatars that we have today that can be done with mobile, I think it's a great step, but it's just one of the steps. There's a lot of different steps to do before you can close that sandwich and say, oh, here it is. And we don't need to, we can actually be able to create a system or software for different brands, and we're not there yet, because I think that the rigging for the actual body of a human is much more complex compared to nails, compared to accessories, compared to footwear, and compared to makeup. We're on a different level compared to those categories, unfortunately.
Absolutely. So you in the beginning of the interview, you said that you saw a lot of factories burning a lot of garments, right? And that sort of shaped your passion for fashion. So when you're actually trying to address this, let me ask you this: should there be a penalty or a tax on these firms that burn the garment versus the companies that don't do that?
Yeah, the problem, of course, of course there should be. The thing is, how do you know? You will never know. It's very hard to actually know, for real. So I think ethics plays a huge part in there, and I think it's being conscious. Like these leaders, of course, margins are extremely important, and bottom lines are there as well. But I think it's a lot about ethics, because you don't know if they're burning, or you don't know how much CO2 they're polluting, or given that the cost of water in a lot of countries is free, you can use as much as you want. But what is the actual cost of using so much water? So these are the things, of course, they should be penalized and so forth. The thing is, how with what system. I think that goes back to what the government can do as initiatives in the future to support a more healthy ecosystem for the future. I think that probably goes also quite above only the manufacturer's fault or the brand's fault, or this all should also go from a law or legislation perspective.
Absolutely. You said that anyone who can design that rigging from a digital version to the real person's body, right, will advance the technology and the industry significantly. Who should
Yeah.
pay for it? Should that be the government that develops this? Should it be private companies? Should it be the people that are burning the garments? Who should be financially paying for this development?
I think that's a great question. I've never thought about this. I think whoever is interested in entering this market can try and can invest on this. I think from our side, we are also doing this as well, and we're investigating on what are the ways in order to do this in the most, of course, efficient, cost-effective way. The thing though is that it does require a lot of tech engineers in order to do this, software engineers and AI programmers. So it's a bit tricky, and the technology is there, but I think it's not totally there. So you're touching an area that investors probably in 2017, it was a really hot topic, the days of those magic mirrors. And then when the economy dropped, people stopped this. They're like, we don't want to touch this anymore. And many of them went more into automotive, medical. Medical is a huge business here, and also urban architecture and planning through AI and smart cities. So I think that's probably where more of the investment went, actually, compared to fashion.
Absolutely. As you're looking at metaverse, do you see the big tech companies winning, or do you see smaller companies who are perhaps like Upland or Sandbox or Decentraland or any of the other metaverse smaller companies? Who creates the future of the metaverse? Is it big tech or is it smaller incumbents?
For China or for
You can answer. You can answer for both, for China and the
okay.
rest of the world.
I think that for China, the big tech companies are definitely going to play a major role, just because it's part of the government. All big tech companies are from the government. So that is already a dictatorship that is very clear and through the line. But we're also in parallel going to see a more decentralized way of new emerging talents coming up and really doing or creating their own metaverse. So we're going to see these big tech that are always going to be there because that's a state-owned enterprise mixed with private. But we're also going to see these parallel games and metaverses in the future that will play a huge role. And I think that that's where it's going to start to get really, really interesting. For the West, maybe it's going to happen something like this, but I'm not sure, because I saw Meta trying to do this. I don't feel it was very successful. No, let's not say that. Cut. But I've seen other big techs in the world do that. Some of them were successful, some of them were a bit less. That really depends on how they work with their hardware and their software and their data. I think that's really the big thing to go forward here. Who owns the best tools are going to win the game.
Absolutely. So when you're looking at both Metaverse and Web3, is the future centralized or decentralized?
I think for the West, it's going to be definitely decentralized. And I think that's a very exciting time. Of course, it can be a bit more dangerous because, there's also different things that can happen around. For China, it's going to be decentralized in brackets to an extent. Because everything is still going to be hyper regulated. Blockchains are also going to be centralized within government servers. So this is all, and cryptocurrency is not allowed. So it's still going to be very, very controlled here in a more decentralized manner. I don't know if that makes sense.
Absolutely. So let me ask you this question then. We talked about centralized and decentralized metaverse. Do you think open metaverse or closed metaverse are the future?
I think the whole value of the metaverse is to allow people to self-express themselves regardless of their background or where they're coming from. It's more of a fantasy land that nobody can own, but that everybody is in. So the open metaverse for me personally is much more exciting because as soon as you do a closed metaverse, there's a dictator or there's a boss or there's a leader. And that's for me, that goes back to web 2.0. I mean, Instagram is the leader. If you do something wrong, they tell you that you did something wrong, and then they penalize you for a couple of days and blah blah blah, right? So that for me is more of a web 2.0 kind of mentality, and I think that if you're going to be decentralized, you guys should do it to its maximal form, of course following like ethical or healthy procedures. But I think that's the beauty of web 3, right? That people anywhere in the world can enter. That is also going to cause a lot of corrosion though, because of the identity, probably identity theft, where you're coming from, how you interact with people online and offline, and who's who, right? We're already seeing this here in Shanghai. People have different concepts than before on who's who. Everyone's talking about the metaverse, and people saying they're doing the metaverse. Is that really true? Where are they from? So we're already seeing a bit of this in real life, and I can imagine that in a completely decentralized area, that's going to be amplified times 150. So that's also very important. Authenticity, understanding where the credibility is in that account or that person and so forth, and substance. I think substance will continue to be a thing, and the more decentralized it is, the more there's going to be new rules probably in the future that we'll evolve with, but that's going to be probably an issue.
Absolutely. So building on your conversation, Yanni, how is China looking at cybersecurity when it comes to Web3 and Metaverse?
Oh wow. That's a very interesting question. For what concerns cybersecurity, I think the nation is extremely, they think that this is a very important topic, and of course, there's huge investment in that area. However, when we talk about cybersecurity, you also need to kind of understand that our phones today, we're completely tracked everywhere. We have facial recognition everywhere it goes. So if I want to go to a restaurant, they'll recognize who I am. If I want to go and buy an apple at the grocery store, they'll recognize who I am. And that's and because we don't have actual physical wallets, everything is tracked and everything is trackable. So now, because there's like some COVID cases, we still have this going on, I get these little SMS saying, "Hi, Annie, I saw that you just went on this road. This means that you have to do a health checkup." So we're kind of tracked in here. So the cybersecurity here is already like, so I think it's, I don't know if this is the same in the West, but here they're very open and frank about it. Everyone's watching you all the time. And if there's not the cameras here or the phone that's listening to the conversation, there are so many facial recognition cameras here that I think one at every block or three at every block. So the technology to master this is extremely high. I mean, it's even if on the metro for theft, they've actually created AI recognition. When they see somebody trying to steal something, they can actually recognize this through camera now, through more like neural programming and so forth. So yeah, I do believe it's a huge issue, but I think that they're already really investing a lot of money in that category, and I think it's not going to stop. I think it's going to start increasing a lot more with the metaverse, and it's going to become a bit crazy probably because they're very open about it as well. There's no, there is no like there's not a lot of privacy. So we, you know, those things or the technological things, we all know that we can be hurt. That's it.
Absolutely. So let me ask you this then. Do you think that is a better system in which they're watching or they're listening to everything? Is that a better system when it compares to, say, a Western system where they're not always watching you or they're not always listening to you?
Oh wow, Tan, those are very hard questions. I think that there it can go both ways. Of course, the privacy is extremely important. So for us, we're kind of used to being very open all the time, and that's why we're very careful with our words, and we learn to read a lot in between the lines. This is probably a strength that I also gained over the years. The thing though is, from a security standpoint, I can still leave the house at like midnight or 2 or 1 a.m. and it's so secure because nothing's gonna happen. So from a security standpoint of the everyday life, you do feel it, because I heard that in the UK, or there's like these after hours, like after 8, that the women don't go out anymore. Is that true? Understand?
In some areas, yes. In some
Right.
areas,
So,
yes.
okay. So for us, we don't have really this concept, but from a very negative standpoint, which is a very obvious, the data information that they collect, the data information that they are able to take in from every single individual, that, and they are very transparent with it, and they're going to use it, of course, and the government can resell it. That is a huge business, but it's also very manipulative, I have to say, because that allows you to really be able to compel and manage 1.4 billion people very easily. And if you come to China one day, you will actually understand what I mean. Like it's a big deal, this situation, because you can actually manage every single person who has a phone through news and through information and through gathering the information and collecting the information within certain targeted groups, down to a very detailed precision. And that's quite interesting, because that I mean, yeah, let's leave it at that.
Absolutely. So let me ask you this, and let's go back a little bit to the fashion side of things.
Yeah,
Who do you think will win the Metaverse and Web3 race? Is it VR or is it AR?
I think it's going to be AR.
Why do you think so?
I think for VR, the fact that you actually have to purchase an equipment is already it's already like an obstacle. And the second thing is, a lot of that equipment that we're using, because I tested a lot of VR. I mean, I've tested different types of VR in China, even the really well done ones. And I think there's a problem with this, is that some people actually cannot watch that for that long. I actually personally cannot watch that for that long, even if it's done super well. I start getting like car or C, I don't even know what it's called. Like there's
Seasick,
something
seasick,
yeah,
motion sickness.
physiological in me that does not work well. So after 2 minutes, I have to stop, and I go somewhere else, and I do something else. And I think that's the obstacle, at least for a minor population of people. I don't know if it's minor or not. I didn't see the researches on that. But from my personal standpoint, AR is more phygital, which means it's your real face or your real personality or your real body mixed with something digital. And I think we need something touching the real life, because at the end, we are human beings. I mean, we're made out of flesh, we're animals of, well, we're educated animals or whatever. And I think we still need the basics, being with friends, social communities, getting out there, purchasing offline to some extent is still also very interesting, if especially it's going to be more experience driven. Eating out is also still going to continue to some extent. So I think that the touching a bit of the physical world is still going to be a necessity.
Absolutely. So let me ask you this, Yanie. What will bring e-commerce to Metaverse and Web3?
Oh, that's a great question. I think that for us, because I was also talking to somebody about this today, very exciting person, and we were actually talking about this topic, and because of the NFT situation, we were like how to add value to the customers and how to um, grow their cash or their value in the metaverse with the NFTs they bought, and that's by actually creating a metaverse experience for gaming. So the e-commerce needs to be tied with the digital twin, where the digital twin should also be tied in the games. And I think the games in the future should be also they should also be intertwined together so that you can be able to recycle your skins on a larger platform or larger ecosystem or metaverses that connect with each other. But from a short-term standpoint, I think the question should be how am I able to give more value to the customers in China who bought those NFTs whilst we understand that crypto is not a factor. So for us, it's going to be more on immersive experiences, gamings, the extension of the metaverse, always tied to e-commerce and always tied to phygital, because this is also an insight that the government gave us. They want to go more phygital, which means there has to be a physical product involved at the end of the day.
Absolutely. So, Yanni, I've never been more happy and enthusiastic to ask the next question to someone I've interviewed. But since you are from fashion, let me ask you this. How far away are we from haptic suits becoming a reality and their integration to the metaverse?
Okay, thanks for asking this question, Tan. I do think we're a bit far away from this, especially for the fashion category, because these suits do require different senses. And I think that now we're not even at the fitting stage. We're still at this stage. And for me, the suits are at this stage because that means they're able to recreate at least 80% or maybe 70% of most of your senses in a metaverse or virtual environment and so forth. So I think that we need to go to the first step here, which is here, and the suits are here.
So how long do you think that is? 10 years from today?
Yeah, I think at least 10 years, because I think right now we need to more focus on mastering the small things first. I was also speaking with Microsoft last week about this, sorry, 2 weeks ago about this, or not exactly about the suits, but where are they now in terms of real digital environment or sensory environments, right? And right now, I think in the next 2 years to come, we're going to be able to see, for example, me and you today, Tan, we're speaking online on a Zoom conference call, very 2D driven with the desktop. I think in the future, we're going to be able to eat together in real time in 3 or 4D dimension. Like you won't be able to see that I'm on a screen. It's going to look so real that that you're going to feel like we know each other for a long time. And that is what they're trying to do with mini cabins. So inside they're actually doing like these mini cabins, and they're doing these trials between Beijing and Shanghai with their internal team. So these are like things that we could see in the next year and a half, 2 years coming down. So when you talk about the suits, I do think it would probably take another 8 to 10 years regarding where we are and where they seem to be developing and so forth.
Absolutely. So let me ask you the next question. Do you think the global internet bandwidth is fast enough for Metaverse and Web3 to have a mass adoption?
That's also a great question. Right now, I think that it's still at the initiation, and I think things are going to have to evolve definitely, because even though we are in 5G and it's faster than 3G, 4G, I feel really old saying that. I do think that there needs to be significant improvements in the metaverse, because even now we're talking today and the line is cutting and the video is, so imagine rendering huge amount of data and huge amount of information where, 10, 20, 30, 40,000 people can see it. I do think that there's going to be a new wave. And that's why I do think the metaverse is here and it's good, but the technology paired with it needs to also evolve. So I think things are going to evolve as also the bandwidth increases. That's for sure. I think right now we're at the exciting stage. Like when I arrived in China, it was the initiation of Weibo, WeChat, those kind of Web2 platforms, and people were kind of scrambling to be able to understand those platforms. Like Me Too, Weibo, WeChat. What is that? And today, those little companies who started with like 4 people are 120, 500 people. And that's because they were the pioneers where things were really gray and very messy. And I do think that that's what's going to happen again. It's like literally the next wave of the internet. So as technology increases, as people mature a bit, I think we're going to go to the next level.
Absolutely. Can Metaverse and Web3 help in social justice?
I don't know if I'm the best person to ask this, but I will answer it from how I see the things. I think that metaverse should technically help in social justice. And the reason I'm thinking about this is because I went to Hangzhou last week for the TCOM Metaverse summit, and they asked the same question to somebody else. And right now there's a lot of immigration changes and issues in China, especially recently, the past 8 months, and people are trying to get out. But because it's a very linear stage, getting visas or immigrations for this population is extremely difficult right now. So we were, the people or the speakers or the hosts were actually saying, in the future, there should be immigration officers in the metaverse where no matter the time difference or whatever, you can actually go there and apply. And that actually increases technically the social justice, and not only to the people who are extremely rich or who have huge connections can pass this frontier. So I do think that decentralizing things makes things a bit more equal for the larger population. This I do believe. If we're able to have these types of rules and make it look like a second reality in the metaverse that is strong enough for blockchain, for documents, for authentication, I do think that we can reach, potentially social justice. Yes.
Absolutely. Are VCs investing enough in Metaverse and Web3?
I think right now, from what I'm hearing, I think that the good VCs, because there's two different stories here. Some of them are saying, oh, tech companies, even China, are slashing their team to 30, 40%. The economy in China is going bad, blah, 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 blah. But on the other hand, the big VCs or people who with big capital, they have to invest in this because else they're going to lose the game. The same with these big players. I was talking to some of the big players. I'm like, why are you investing in everything? Like, that's way too much money. They're like, oh, because we don't want to be the next IBM. So they cannot permit themselves to not invest because we don't know what the next item is going to be. Is it going to be AR? Is it going to be VR? Is it going to be glasses? Or what instrument are we going to be using that's going to break those boundaries, that it's going to be adapted to the mass customers? We don't know that yet. So people are still investing. In China, people are more investing in the future of the metaverse and how it can potentially look like. This is where I see VCs investing in. However, credibility within that framework is also really, really important. So this is also what I'm seeing here in the market.
Absolutely. So my final question for you, Yanie, and this, I think, I think this is a question that a lot of people would have. You said that China has its own ecosystem and it doesn't allow external private blockchains, it doesn't allow cryptocurrencies. So, for instance, if I buy an NFT from you in China, right, would it be interoperable outside China? Can I get it on Ethereum blockchain or Solana blockchain or any of
Of
these other
course not.
blockchains?
No, I
You
mean,
get
absolutely not. No, if we would have to create an NFT and you would like to buy it and make it interoperable, we'd actually just mint it on a totally different platform that is compatible for the West. So instead of having this T-shirt that's green, we just recreate the T-shirt in, for example, in blue and mint it in another platform. But yeah, definitely here, this is not interoperable unless Baidu and Tencent are going to try to be interoperable with their blockchains, which I don't know if that's going to happen, but definitely that way the West to the East is going to be two different worlds.
if you were to give a suggestion to the decision makers in China, would you request them to consider interoperability? Because obviously interoperability would help creators and entrepreneurs and facilitators within the industry.
That is a very political question. From my point of view, I would be very happy to have interoperability because that does help private enterprises. Unfortunately, this year, I think the government is going to close itself down much stronger than ever before. So it's going to be really more state-owned enterprise over private enterprises, which means that we're going to see a closure of this significantly. So I think interoperability is 125% off of the table for the next 2 years, at least. I do think, and that's really more according, because this question is interesting because it's touching a lot of political factors, but I do have to say political factors in this question are fundamental because interoperability means that you can mix it with Ethereum or whatever. And for them, that's impossible because how would they have the control over what you're doing? Then there would actually be a huge loophole. Then we'd actually see a huge influx of Chinese trying to enter.
Could there be a possibility where it goes through a centralized regulator? So if you want interoperability, you apply for an interoperability license, the government approves it, Chinese government, and after they have approved that, then you can do interoperability. Could that be something they could perhaps consider?
Maybe this could actually be a good idea if there are some financial NFT products that could be through license and trading only. I did hear about this, but I think it's very, very specific. And I don't think they can be traded with standardized contracts, but it's not, this is, I think, regulated with a certain product. Yeah.
It's essentially trying to regulate the on-ramp and off-ramp, right? When you talk about on-ramp and off-ramp, how do you put your money in or take your money out? But in this case, how do you put your asset in and how do you take your asset out, right? So
yeah, because it's the same thing. It's the same, it's the same concept.
Absolutely. So Yanie, I think that brings us to the end of our interview. It was a great pleasure having you here.
Thank you.
Before I end the interview, I would say the same thing that I always say. You be the arbiter of truth, the viewers of the Metaverse Street Journal. This was the 14th episode of Reading Between the Lines with Tan the Man. I have with me Yanie, who's the founder of Pom Pom and Sanpom. She's a member of the Metaverse Fashion Council, and it was my pleasure to have you here, Yanie. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tan. I'm very, very appreciative of being here today and being able to share a bit more information. And also, if you guys do have more questions, please feel free to reach out for more of, this kind of topic. Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. I think we have to bring you back for another interview sometime soon.
Thank you so much, Tan.
Absolutely.